The first red flag was the way he shook my hand. Too firm, too fast, and with eyes already glancing past me like I was someone to get through, not someone to meet. "Helena, right?" the new CEO said. "We'll talk soon. I've heard things." It was his first day, and mine was supposed to be his briefing on global partnerships. Instead, I was brushed off with a smile that felt like a shutdown. I'd been here 17 years. I'd seen 4 CEOs come and go. I had built the company's international presence from a handful of translated brochures to a global web of trusted partners that brought in 68% of our annual revenue. I should have known then. But when you've spent your entire career solving problems quietly, invisibly, you forget how easy it is to be overlooked, especially by people who think diplomacy is a checkbox on a spreadsheet. His name was Landon Pierce. Young for a CEO. Ivy League background. Came from a SaaS giant on the West Coast where he'd been credited with aggressive expansion and brand-forward deal-making. Translation: loud, fast, and temporary. For the first few weeks, I kept my head down. Gave him space. Let him tour departments and hold flashy all-hands meetings where he used words like synergy and disrupting the legacy model. He met with marketing, sales, even customer service. He never booked time with me. I emailed his assistant. Twice. No response. So I waited. I'd learned long ago that pushing too hard gets you labeled pushy, emotional, hard to work with. I'd never been any of those things. I was a calm storm, quiet but deeply rooted. Our partners in Tokyo called me Shizukiza, the quiet one who gets things done. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon with nothing unusual on my calendar, I was called to the 14th floor. His office smelled like expensive leather and fresh paint. A fake fern sat in the corner, too symmetrical to be real. Landon stood behind his desk with the same look he wore on day one, confident and impatient. "Helena," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Let's have a real talk." I sat. He didn't waste time. "I've been reviewing the org chart, and frankly, some roles feel dated. Yours, for example. Global Partnerships Lead. It's too fragmented. We're centralizing everything through brand strategy." I didn't move. He continued. "We're taking the company in a new direction. Faster, louder, more visible. We can't rely on old methods, even if they worked in the past. Relationships are nice, but brand power is better. I'm sure you understand." I nodded slowly. "So what does that mean for me?" He exhaled, as if disappointed I'd made him say it. "It means we're parting ways. Effective immediately." There it was. No warning. No review. Just a polite execution. I looked at him and for the first time really saw him, not as a leader but as a child with a corner office. "May I ask," I said calmly, "who you'll be assigning to manage our partner relationships in Japan, Germany, and Brazil?" He smiled, clearly prepared. "Marissa. Bright young talent. MBA, fluent in business Spanish." I bit my tongue. Business Spanish wasn't going to help her navigate 3 years of trust building with Paulo's family in Sao Paulo. Or the unspoken protocols of meetings with Mr. Tanaka in Osaka, who still used fax for formal agreements because he believed email was too cold. But I didn't say any of that. I just stood up. "Well," I said, "thank you for the clarity." "You've been valuable, Helena," he added, walking around his desk. "But we need people who can scale fast. It's nothing personal." "Of course not. It never is." I walked out with my head high. My office had already been flagged. A young intern from HR hovered outside the door, awkwardly offering me a cardboard box and an envelope with my severance agreement. "Take your time," she said. "We're really grateful for all you've done." Grateful. The word tasted like dust. I packed slowly. I took the mug from Berlin, hand-painted by a client's daughter. The tea set from Osaka. A photo of me and Sarah Lint from Munich, toasting the day we signed our 10-year exclusive with her firm. I left the awards. The company logo on a plaque didn't mean anything anymore. The box was heavier than I expected. Maybe because I knew I wasn't just carrying things. I was carrying the silence that came with 17 years of unseen labor. In the elevator, I checked my phone. 3 messages. One from May in Hong Kong. Looking forward to our check-in Thursday. Let me know if the agenda changed. One from Paolo. Heard rumors. Tell me they're not true. And one from Mr. Tanaka. Just a faxed image of a teacup. Cracked. No words. Just that. It said more than a boardroom full of executives ever could. When I stepped outside into the cool air, I didn't cry. I didn't fume. I didn't scream. I just walked. One step at a time, away from a company that had mistaken visibility for value and forgotten the power of quiet trust. They thought they'd fired a translator. What they'd really lost was their only bridge. The first time I ever closed a deal in silence, I was 28, sitting across a lacquered table in a Kyoto tea house, trying not to sweat through my blazer. Mr. Tanaka had flown in from Osaka. He spoke little English. His assistant, even less. The company had sent me in place of a VP who was double-booked, but insisted the deal was ready to close. What they didn't know was that nothing was ready. Tanaka hadn't even seen the final version of the licensing agreement. The presentation file was filled with slang and graphs without legends. There was no interpreter. Just me, a black notebook, and 4 years of self-taught Japanese layered over a deep respect for nuance. So I sat quietly, watched his expressions, poured the tea myself, and apologized for the oversight, once sincerely and with a bow. I didn't try to sell. I didn't try to impress him. I just listened, asked questions, gave him space to speak slowly. Let silence stretch. By the time we stood to leave, he placed his business card on the table with 2 hands, nodded deeply, and said, in English, "I will work only with you." That was the beginning. People always assume partnerships are about charm, being persuasive. Relationship management, they call it like it's something you can automate or outsource to a CRM tool. But what they don't realize is that trust isn't transactional. It's cultural, emotional, sometimes even generational. You don't just show up and make a deal. You show up repeatedly, on time, with respect, remembering names, honoring customs, asking about a partner's family before bringing up a proposal. It's not strategy. It's care. Over the next decade, I became the quiet thread running through every global deal our company touched. When our German distributor's CEO passed away unexpectedly, I was the one who flew to Berlin for the funeral, because no one else knew his daughter was next in line, and terrified. When our Brazilian supplier faced regulatory pressure, I walked the factory floor with Paulo and met with local officials, not as a company rep, but as someone who knew the town, the language, the context. When the Thai government changed its import policies overnight, I worked with our Bangkok partners until 2 a.m., rewriting contracts line by line to stay compliant without losing money. Every one of those moments had one thing in common: they never showed up on a slide deck. No one tracked them. No one tweeted them. But they kept the company alive. I was fluent in 5 languages, but none of them mattered more than consistency. Every birthday remembered. Every coffee shared. Every message returned, even when I was exhausted. Even when no one in the home office understood why it was important. Because trust doesn't come from what you say. It comes from how you show up when no one is watching. I wasn't the loudest person in meetings. I didn't campaign for recognition. But our partners knew. Helena doesn't lie. Helena follows through. Helena listens. In many ways, I wasn't just a representative. I was the personification of the company's integrity. And over time, people stopped working with the brand. They worked with me. I knew that made me vulnerable. I didn't have a fancy title. I didn't have a personal brand. No social media presence, no hype. Just history. Real, earned, unglamorous history. And I knew one day, someone new would come along and think they could replicate it with a prettier slide deck and a louder voice. But what they could never replicate was the weight of trust I'd carried quietly for 17 years. I remember once, during a leadership offsite in Toronto, one of the younger directors asked, "What's your strategy for managing global accounts?" I smiled and said, "I send fewer emails, but I take longer to write them." He didn't get it. Most of them didn't. Because the people who understood my work weren't in that room. They were in shipping warehouses in Poland, government offices in Manila, and family-run shops in Istanbul. And they didn't care about metrics. They cared about me. When the new CEO fired me, he thought he was eliminating a cost center. Trimming fat. Streamlining operations. He didn't know that I'd negotiated our shipping terms with Asia under handshake agreements that predated his MBA. He didn't know that our German partners refused to sign without me reviewing the clause translations, because they didn't trust automated legalese. He didn't know that our Middle Eastern supplier once pulled out of a contract until I personally apologized for a cultural misstep the legal team didn't even recognize. He didn't know that I wasn't just a name on the org chart. I was the reason they still picked up the phone. When I walked out that day, no one followed me. No headlines. No farewell party. Just a cardboard box and 17 years of invisible scaffolding they assumed would hold without me. But you don't remove the foundation and expect the structure to stay standing. You don't fire the only person who speaks the language, literally and metaphorically, and expect the world to keep listening. Back at my apartment, I pulled out a black leather folder from my shelf. Inside were handwritten notes from over the years, birthday cards from partners, thank you letters, photos of grand openings where I'd been invited not as staff, but as family. I wasn't angry. I wasn't broken. I was done being taken for granted. And I knew something Landon didn't. The silence was coming. And it would speak louder than any memo he'd ever send. It started quietly. A missed call here. An email left unanswered. A recurring meeting where only one side showed up. At first, they probably thought it was just bad timing. Maybe someone was out sick. Maybe there was a local holiday they forgot to check. After all, partnerships don't just fall apart in a week. Except when they do. 3 weeks after I was let go, I got a LinkedIn message from Sarah Thompson in business development. "Hey, Helena. Weird question. Did you by any chance reschedule the quarterly review with the Osaka team before you left? We haven't heard from them." Just silence. I stared at the message for a moment. No greeting. No how are you. Just straight to the point. Silence equals confusion, and they assumed I might still be patching the holes. I didn't reply. Because silence has power. Especially when the people on the other end have never experienced it before. By the following week, it wasn't just Osaka. I heard from Thomas, one of the few decent guys left in operations. Germany's gone dark. No replies from the Lint group. Marissa tried calling Sarah directly and got sent to voicemail. She's panicking. I knew she would be. Sarah doesn't do surface-level communication. Her family's company survived 2 wars, 2 recessions, and a pandemic. She values precision, consistency, and above all, relationships. We'd spent 10 years building trust. She didn't just work with our company. She worked with me. And now, they had no idea what she was thinking, which meant they had no leverage. I don't think Landon noticed at first. He was too busy posting articles about disruptive leadership and redefining cross-border expansion on his corporate blog. I saw one post where he shared a photo of himself at a global conference, captioned, "We don't follow maps. We redraw them." Cute. But here's the thing about maps. when you throw away the one guiding you through unfamiliar terrain, don't act surprised when you get lost. I knew what was happening. I could feel it unraveling, one partner at a time. First came the silence, then the polite decline of meetings, then the carefully worded notices of temporary suspension of negotiations or internal reevaluation of partnership terms. They were pulling away, not because they were angry, because they no longer had a reason to stay. Paulo emailed me privately. The subject line was blank. His message simply read, "Tell me it isn't true." I didn't answer. Not yet. Because it wasn't my mess to fix. And I wasn't interested in stepping back into a fire someone else had set. A week later, I got a call from a blocked number. I let it ring out. Then another. This time from the main office line. I picked up. "Helena. It's Marissa." Her voice was tight. A little too fast. "I know this is awkward. I'm sure you've heard things. But I just wanted to, well, I hoped we could talk. Maybe you could help us understand some of the legacy relationship protocols." I let her speak. She was floundering, but polite. I didn't hate her. She'd been handed a role she was never trained for, set up to fail in a room where her voice was expected to replace mine without a second thought. After a pause, I said, "Has anyone asked why they're not replying?" She hesitated. We figured there was an issue with time zone coordination or… "No," I said calmly. "That's not it. It's not. They're not replying because you're strangers. And they don't trust strangers with their business." Silence. "But we're the company. The contract's with us." "No," I said. "The contract was with me, on behalf of the company. You took away the person they trusted and replaced her with someone who never met their kids, never visited their facilities, never learned how they say no when they mean maybe." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "So what do we do?" I didn't answer, because I wasn't their fallback plan. Later that night, I sat on the balcony of my apartment with a cup of jasmine tea and my notebook in my lap. I made a list. Osaka. Silent. Sao Paulo, circling the exit. Munich, likely to reassign contracts elsewhere. Dubai, cautious but watching. Seoul, waiting for a signal. Each one was a name, a handshake, a dinner shared, a problem solved. Not leads. Not channels. People. And I didn't just speak their language. I spoke their world. I got another email 2 days later. This time from Landon himself. Subject: "Let's talk." I didn't open it, because I knew what it said. And because what he wanted wasn't a conversation. He wanted a fix. But I wasn't his patch. I wasn't the glue for a bridge he broke on purpose. In the background, I'd already started talking with someone else. A quiet company. Smaller. Humble. Based in Denmark, with a strong ethical framework and a belief in relationship-first growth. They weren't looking for flashy deals or viral campaigns. They were looking for integrity. I didn't tell anyone yet, but I knew where I was going. And I knew who would follow. Back in the office, I imagined the meetings. The whispered panic. The boardroom full of strategy decks with no one on the other end to receive them. Landon pacing, wondering why the world wasn't responding to his emails. Why weren't they answering? Because you fired the only person they trusted to pick up the phone. The thing about being the bridge is this: no one notices you until you're gone and there's a river they can't cross. For 17 years, I was that bridge. Not glamorous, not loud, just steady. The kind of steady that makes everyone forget there's even a gap beneath them. I didn't resent it. I took pride in it. In being dependable. In being the person who could walk into a room on one continent and be greeted with a handshake that meant something. They thought they replaced me with a new face and a few updated slide decks. What they didn't understand was that you can't substitute presence. You earn it. Over time. Through silence and consistency. I was sitting in a corner cafe in Copenhagen, notebook open, when the email came. Subject: Invitation to join Nordex Global. It was short. Just a few lines. We've admired your work. We believe in relationships, not transactions. Would you consider leading our new Global Trust initiative? I stared at it for a long moment, then smiled. I'd met Jonas, the founder, 2 years earlier at a sustainability roundtable. Back then, I was representing my old company, and he was quietly observing while everyone else talked over each other. We had lunch afterward, talked about diplomacy, about cultural fluency, about humility as a business model. He remembered. I replied with one word. Yes. I spent the next few weeks sketching a new kind of strategy. Not expansion, not conquest. Connection. I called it earned ground. No cold outreach. No LinkedIn spam. Just rebuilding relationships that deserved better. Quietly. One conversation at a time. I began reaching out to my former partners, not as a recruiter, not as a salesperson, just as Helena. The woman who remembered their daughter's graduation date. Who knew their office manager's name. Who sent tea from Kyoto every winter. I didn't ask for contracts. I asked how they were doing. And one by one, they responded. Paolo called first. I heard about the new place, he said. If you're building something, I want in. Sarah sent flowers. I never returned the company's emails. I was waiting for yours. Even Mr. Tanaka faxed me a single sheet of paper. A drawing. Of a bridge. Rebuilt. We weren't stealing clients. We were restoring trust. Because what Landon and his board never understood was that global partnerships aren't about brand alignment. They're about people alignment. They removed me like I was a plug-in. But I wasn't a tool. I was the human connection between two worlds. And once that connection was broken, no amount of marketing could glue it back together. One morning, I woke to a message from Thomas. They've lost Dubai. And it's bad. Apparently, their Middle East partner had pulled out mid-negotiation, citing shifts in cultural alignment. Translation: They didn't trust the new team. Translation: Landon's charm didn't work outside of pitch decks. Then came Seoul. Then Singapore. One by one, the threads came undone. And no one inside that building knew how to stitch them back together. Because the needle was gone. At Nordex, we did things differently. No aggressive launches. No forced scalability. Just relationships like gardens, planted, watered, respected. I built a small team. Lean. Multilingual. Empathetic. I gave them a rule. No call shorter than it needs to be. No meeting without asking about their story. No deal without face-to-face understanding. I wasn't building a strategy. I was building a standard. Landon called twice. Left voicemails I didn't play. He emailed, too. Subject: Let's reset. Another: Your legacy still matters here. That one made me pause. Legacy. A word they never used when I was in the room. Too little, too late. You don't fire a bridge and then wonder why no one will cross the river. Jonas called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon. His desk was covered in paper sketches and coffee-stained prototypes for a new remote health device we were launching in Asia. You know what our partners say about you? He asked. I raised an eyebrow. Do I want to? They say you're not just someone who understands their language. You're someone who respects their silence. I smiled. That's the job. No, he said. That's your gift. He handed me a folder. Inside were notes from partner meetings, praise, gratitude, even handwritten thank you cards. The kind I used to get at my old company that no one ever asked to see. They don't follow our brand, Jonas said. They follow you. And that's when it hit me. They didn't follow a company. They followed a person who took the time to learn their rhythms, not just their rates. A person who flew across oceans not to close deals, but to open dialogue. A person who understood that the best relationships aren't built in boardrooms. They're built over time, with care, with presence. They used to say I was hard to define. Now I knew why. I wasn't a position. I was a bridge. And I wasn't going back. Because some bridges, once burned, reveal the river was never worth crossing again. It started with a forwarded email. Thomas, ever the quiet observer, had been keeping me in the loop. Not officially, but often enough that I didn't feel out of touch. The message was from Landon. Subject, urgent, partnership rescue strategy, private, internal only. I read it on my tablet at a cafe in Copenhagen, with a croissant in one hand and a calm I hadn't known in years. The body of the email was short. Panicked. We're facing a complete breakdown of international relationships. Legal's warning us about clause violations with at least 4 partners. I've reached out to Helena Ward multiple times. We need to bring her back. At any cost. I finished my coffee and didn't respond. Not because I was angry, because I didn't owe them anything anymore. The next day, I got a call from a private number. I answered, out of curiosity more than anything else. Helena, Landon's voice said, surprisingly soft. Thank you for picking up. Silence on my end. I want to apologize, he added quickly. I was wrong. About a lot of things. I didn't understand what you were really doing. I thought I could replicate it, but you can't replicate trust, I said flatly. No, he agreed. You can't. But maybe you can repair it with the right people. Another pause. I'd like to offer you a consultant role, or even executive leadership. You can come back however you want. Just come back. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window. The sky was overcast, but peaceful. The street buzzed with quiet energy. A far cry from the tension I imagined in his office right now. No, I said. A beat of silence. I don't hate you, I added. But I won't fix what you chose to break. I didn't know. You didn't ask. That's the difference. I could hear the strain in his breath, the pride cracking. I could make it right, he said. No, I said again. You could make it work again, but it wouldn't be right. Not for me. I ended the call. Not with anger, not with spite, with clarity. And maybe that's what he feared most. That I didn't walk away because I was hurt. I walked away because I finally understood my worth. The following week, Nordex finalized its 5-year agreement with the Osaka Group, Mr. Tanaka's firm. It wasn't just a partnership. It was a statement. At the signing, he handed me a small gift box. Inside was a ceramic teacup, delicate, white, with a gold seam running through a crack. Kintsugi, he said. You understand. I did. Kintsugi is the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. The philosophy is simple. Broken things, once mended with care, are more beautiful because of their history, not in spite of it. The cup was a symbol, not of what I'd lost, but of what I'd rebuilt, with gold, not glue. Later that month, I got a formal letter from the legal team at my former company. Carefully worded, threatening in tone, though veiled with "we hope" language. They referenced old contracts, implied interference, accused me of poaching partners. I smiled, because I'd prepared for this. I forwarded the letter to my attorney, along with documented proof that I'd never solicited a single partner. They'd come to me, of their own accord, because relationships aren't property, and trust isn't owned, it's earned. One evening, I sat in my new office at Nordex. It was nothing fancy, no leather chairs, no city views. Just a clean desk, a bookshelf, and a world map on the wall with pins marking the partners we were working with. Most of those pins, people I'd once worked with under a different banner. Now they followed a different flag. Mine. But I didn't treat them as assets. I treated them as allies. And that made all the difference. Marissa called once. I didn't expect it. Her voice was quiet. No pitch. No corporate preamble. "I'm sorry," she said. "They threw me into your job with no training. I thought I could handle it. I thought I was supposed to prove something." "You don't need to prove anything to people who set you up to fail," I said. "I just wanted you to know," she said, "that I see it now. Everything you were doing. It wasn't just soft skills. It was infrastructure." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "Take care of yourself," I said. "You deserve better." I've been asked if I regret not going back, if the money or the title would have changed my mind. But no, because going back would have meant carrying weight I'd already put down. It would have meant returning to a system that had to break before it noticed me. And I refuse to be noticed only in my absence. Sometimes I get updates. Thomas sends little texts like, "They just lost Munich. Sarah signed with a competitor." Or, "Osaka office still dark. Guess they never figured out the time zone." I don't gloat. I don't celebrate. I just exhale. Because failure is never satisfying when it comes from ignorance. But it is instructive. One day, maybe they'll learn that people aren't interchangeable, that history matters more than hype, that the quiet, loyal bridge they burned wasn't an employee. She was the reason they ever crossed oceans at all. The sun was rising over Stockholm as I walked into the Nordex boardroom. It wasn't a glossy office with ego-polished wood or chrome fixtures, just long windows, clean lines, and a table big enough to hold a dozen honest conversations. We were preparing to sign the biggest deal in the company's history, a multi-continent distribution partnership across Europe and Asia. It had taken 7 months of gentle negotiation, careful listening, cultural navigation, and trust building. In other words, my kind of work. My name wasn't splashed across the campaign. I wasn't the face of the product. But when I stepped into that room, every handshake, every nod, every smile, it was for me. Because they remembered. And more importantly, they respected. I took my seat beside Jonas, our CEO, who handed me the final agreement to review. "They're with us because of you," he said. "They're with us because we listened," I corrected. "That's all anyone really wants. To be heard. To be understood. To not be spoken over by someone who thinks louder means smarter." He smiled. "Still, they wouldn't have sat at the table without you." I didn't argue. I just signed. Not for the recognition, but for the fulfillment of something much deeper. Later that evening, we hosted a quiet dinner at a converted library downtown. The partners brought their spouses. There were no speeches, no spotlights. Just conversation, storytelling, real connection. At one point, Paolo raised his glass and said softly, "I don't work with companies. I work with people I trust." The whole table raised their glasses in silence, and for a long moment, I felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Not pride. Not victory. Peace. After dessert, Mr. Tanaka approached me. We stepped outside to watch the snow fall over the street. He stood there quietly for a moment, gloved hands folded in front of him. "You rebuilt the bridge," he said finally. No, I replied. We built a new one. One we own. He nodded. Then, in perfect English, added, some structures must collapse for stronger ones to rise. He turned and walked back inside. And I just stood there, letting the cold touch my face, thinking about how far I'd come, not in miles, but in meaning. It would have been easy to burn it all down when they pushed me out, to make noise, to post a viral takedown, to expose the mismanagement and the consequences. But that was never my way. Because trust isn't something you use as a weapon. It's something you protect, even after it's been broken. A few weeks later, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Just my name written in a familiar, careful hand. Inside was a small leather-bound notebook. The first page read, "For the one who kept us together without asking for credit." T. T stood for Thomas, of course. Always quietly watching. Always seeing more than he let on. The rest of the notebook was filled with handwritten notes, copied from emails, memos, and cards from people I'd worked with over the years. Words I never saw. Gratitude I never received. Until now. Some were simple. She never made me feel stupid for asking. She remembered my son's surgery without being told twice. Helena didn't save the deal. She saved my faith in people. I closed the notebook gently and placed it on my shelf next to the only award I kept, one not from a company, but from a community in Sao Paulo. A hand-carved plaque that simply said, "Our bridge to the world." I still get questions from younger women in the field. How do you build that kind of trust? I always say the same thing. Slowly, carefully, authentically. Because trust isn't a KPI. It's the reason people answer your call instead of dodging it. It's the reason a deal holds steady through storm and shift. It's the reason your name, even when whispered, still carries weight. I never went back. Not to the old title. Not to the old building. Not to the old version of myself that thought being quiet meant being replaceable. Now I know better. Now I teach others to know better. Sometimes, late at night, I imagine what it must be like inside that boardroom now. Landon pacing, trying to reframe failure as market resistance. Marissa gone. Thomas quietly updating his resume. The hallway silent in all the places that used to hum with movement. And I don't feel bitterness. I feel distance. The healthy kind. The kind that lets you appreciate the view without wanting to go back. They thought I was a translator. Someone to relay words across borders. But I was never just translating language. I was translating trust. Between people. Between cultures. Between silence and understanding. And you can't replace that with a bullet point or a brand guide. You either earn it, or you lose it. As I leave the office for the evening, scarf wrapped tight, I pass a junior associate, wide-eyed, eager, holding a folder like it's sacred. "Good night, Ms. Ward," she says. "Someday, I want to do what you do." I smile. "You will," I say. "Just remember, people won't always remember what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel heard." She nods, like it's the most important thing she's heard all week. And maybe it is. Outside, the snow is still falling. Quiet. Unannounced. Just like trust. You don't see it until it's needed. But when it's there, you can walk across it, steady and strong. Even when the world beneath it is frozen.